Welcome to the Tanz im August podcast. This podcast series is part of the Tanz im August Festival, presented by HAU Hebbel am Ufer. This year it takes place from 13th to 29th of August in Berlin. Several artists from this year's program have been invited to join a conversation series. In each episode, they share insights into their lives and creative work. The artists talk about their past and current projects and offering in-depth perspectives on the works they are presenting at Tanz im August 2026. In this episode, Ricardo Carmona, artistic director of the festival, talks with Simona Deaconescu. She will present her work, The Choreography of Water, on 18th, 19th and 20th of August at HAU 3.
Hello, Simona. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me for the podcast of Tanz in August. Could you start to telling us a bit of your journey as a choreographer and how your practice developed during the last years?
Thank you for the invitation. I started choreography pretty late in my career, usually in Romania, which is the country from where I come from. You have to follow like this trajectory of doing like a ballet school and to have this classical training. But I come from a small city in Romania where there is no theater, no culture whatsoever. So I basically started to study film when I arrived in Bucharest. Career started as a filmmaker, actually as a student in the University of Film. And then in my second year of university, I discovered contemporary dance. It was so interesting for me because everything was like free and abstract, and I was like super in love with contemporary dance. And then I applied for the university and I did film and choreography in the same time. And I was also working in that period. It was a really tough period of time for me. But then, like after I finished the university, where also the training was more like towards dance theater or like creating choreography for theater pieces, like you were taught kind of this hierarchy of director and then all the departments that I also know it from the film school. Anyhow, when I finished, I got a scholarship to go to as a dance Weber for the Impulse Tanz. And then there, my perspective changed a lot about what contemporary dance could mean. And I started to really open myself to many, many things. And little by little, develop this interdisciplinary practice in which I also use my knowledge of doing film, of doing video, doing research. And in the past years, I mainly focused on several projects that continue over years. One is like this research pillar that involves mass dances and how they have been shaped by ideology in history, but also in the present moment. And that's like one strain of my work. And then another strain that involves thinking about the future of the body, hybrid bodies. And this involves a lot of more like scientific research in the area of biology or like fluidics in the sense of what I'm presenting in Tanz im August. And I also have like this feminist project that I'm doing with an Argentinian artist called Flor Firvida Martin, in which we document the labor choreographies of women from Eastern Europe and Latin America. And this is a project that develops in years. It's like a living archive that it's a video installation, and we are developing it, from 2 to 2 years. So this is where I am right now, like shortly.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing all this. I think also we could dive deep into any of these lines that you're researching. But let's focus more on the work that you're going to present here in Berlin. And also, you mentioned that there's also a interest from your side to bring together dance and science, or dance and choreography. Can you talk a bit more about that? And why do you think it's also interesting for you to go there?
Yeah, like one of the questions that I have been having in the let's say, past 5 or 6 years is like how the human body is going to develop in the future in terms of its relationship with the environment, with technology, our understanding of history, of truth, what truth actually means, and how all this is like modifying our body. So it kind of came from this question, like how are we going to transform? And also this idea of deep time and what it means, deep time, like going super back, back in history, where when we didn't look like this, we were not like this, but also going with our imagination and speculating super far into the future. So in between these two very far away points in time. And yeah, in terms of science, I have worked before actually. I have done projects with the Institute of Nuclear Physics here in Magurele in Bucharest. I have worked in a program called Biofriction that works with biohacking for a previous show that I have been developing called Blot, that I think you actually saw when you were in Romania. So I kind of have this practice of looking into scientific research, but I must say that I'm not a scientist. So I do not look with the eyes of a scientist. So I try to find ideas that could transform into choreographic practices or methodologies, and to think about more from that perspective, how to think about the body from that specific perspective. So I do not do like scientific research. I do movement research, but arriving to movement research, looking to scientific materials or doing like experimentations and working with people from the domain. So yeah, more like in this idea.
Yeah, this is super interesting. Also, like in one hand, also because I think through these methods you also open different ways of choreographing and also dealing with the body, which are not the standard ones that you learn at the dance school, for example. Yeah. The show that you're going to present here is called The Choreography of Water. So maybe you can also share with us why this attraction to water and how the beginning of this project started.
Mm-hmm. So this project started. I started this project with my colleague and friend Joana Vrememoser. She is a visual artist. She lives in Berlin. Actually, she lives very near to HAU 3. So we started to think about this project and discuss it in 2020. Usually, I must say that developing my projects usually takes 4, 5, or 6 years. So I'm not like a very fast worker. And in 2020, we started to speak about putting our practices together. And she was just starting to develop like a speculative fluidic computer. It was like one of her first works. And I looked at that and it was amazing. I was amazed by what she was doing. And from our discussions, actually, she referred to the movement of water inside her sculptures as dance or as choreography, which I found it really interesting for a visual artist to think, like to have this choreographic thinking. Also, she used to have a dance training as well. So I said, like, that's an amazing mix. What Ioana does basically is to maybe use some branches of science that have been forgotten or marginalized and like use them in a speculative way. What I was interested in back then was like to understand more about the fluidic system of our bodies and how this fluidic system is connected to the fluidic system of the planet, and how can we think about these two systems together also from an ecofeminist perspective. So I was like reading like this type of papers and like thinking about this, but not like really wanting to do a piece about it. It was just like, I don't know, in my head. So we started to put together some ideas, and first we thought about a museum or gallery work. But then life happened and she got a lot of projects. I got a lot of projects as well. But I kept reading and she started to develop her practice of using fluidics more than like a lot. And then in 2025, last year, I felt that we have to do it now. And I said, like, Ioana, I would like us to go back to that project. She agreed. I was very happy. And we also invited Simona Oprescu. She's also a Romanian artist living in Berlin. And she works with sonification of data, and she has a really interesting practice of creating sounds based on listening and deep listening. So I invited her also into the project, and we ended up working together with a group of 4 dancers in Bucharest. And yeah, we worked in 2 periods. One was dedicated strictly to research with the dancers and with Ioana and Simina, just trying to imagine a new alphabet, a new language, trying to basically understand certain principles from fluidics or like from acousmatic, and trying to see how they can influence the body, or if they can be transformed into movement practices, choreographic practices, and the other way around as well. And then this was in the first part of the year. And then we, in the second part of the year, leading to October, we actually had the rehearsals and the production period.
Yeah, I mean, I think also our listeners, I mean, if they don't see the piece live, they can also look to the photos that we have in the website. But also you see that it's very visual, and there's water sculptures. There's also, of course, the sounds that we can hear on stage. And I had the feeling that these elements, so the sculptures and the sounds, are becoming as important as the performers. So they become performers in itself. Was this a challenge for you and for the rest of the team? How to balance the presence of both?
No, we were very excited with this object. I started to develop an emotional connection towards them. No, not at all. Actually, that was the easiest part of the process, actually, because the dancers themselves were so into the project, and they had similar researches themselves. Yeah, no. And also, it was interesting for me because I was part of the production as well. So I was going to, the objects are made of glass, and they are basically manually blown. I don't know how, like in English, how to explain. So there is a glass artist that actually blows them and kind of creates them using different methods based on Ioana's sketches. But also, like, a challenging part of this object is the sound that they are creating. So basically, they are creating sound based on the movement of water, like an oscillator. So air and water create certain type of tones. Well, that tones are created by some type of orifices. And yeah, that was challenging to make. Like, how to make them so that they sound on a certain tone. So we did several with the people in Bucharest here from a glass production company that took this challenge to work with us. Also, we were very grateful, and yeah, we managed to create a first prototype, and then more objects came. Working with them, for us as dancers and for me as a choreographer, not at all. It was very, very interesting to explore them and to see what they can do. And also, I feel that we don't overuse them. I also didn't want to overuse them. So, like, I would say each one has their own moment, but it's like that. We don't come back or something like this. So yeah, it wasn't hard to work with them. It was more hard to produce like a first prototype and to understand if they are working, if the sound is strong enough to be on stage, these type of things that are more like on the technical side of the.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great to hear that. Yeah. I mean, the piece also works with the idea of water as a system, and you draw parallels between the water that's inside of the sculptures and the sound they make, but also the water that we have in our bodies, the circulation that we have in our bodies, but also the circulation of water inside of the whole planet. This I found very interesting also to draw all these parallelisms. Can you tell us a bit more about this angle of the piece and how then this was also a method to develop the choreography?
Yeah, so basically, like on a very, let's say, simple level, what we are asking the audience is like to think about the circulatory system of their own bodies as the circulatory system of the planet, and think what happens, for example, if you start diverting the blood from your veins or any kind of liquid. What happens if you stop it? What happens if it overflows? So if we would have this type of interventionist way upon our own body, what would happen to our body? So for sure it will, if not die, but decay, but become sick. Something will happen with our system. So in this paradigm, like in this system of thinking, we are inviting the audience also to think about the planet, because like civilizations were born from this idea of people working with water to serve their own purposes, like diverting water for agriculture was one of the first technologies that kind of, I know, developed, let's say, societies. And we come with this question, like we have been diverting water for so long, changing the courses of water on our planet, but we have reached like a tipping point. And we are now in a moment in which we need to think about how much or how this relocating of water, how our interventionist choreography on the water itself influences the planet. So it's more like from this perspective that we started to think about the piece, to open this question. Of course, it's dance and it's choreography, and what we do is usually abstract. So for some people, this opens a certain type of imaginary. For some people, opens another type of imaginary. And actually, we had different experiences because I have this practice of inviting audiences in the rehearsal space all the time. And I have a game, and I basically present certain parts of the piece before the premieres, when I still have time to work on it, of course. And then in an anonymous way, they can give me like super honest feedback. And I have this game with the audience now, and I discovered really interesting things in their imaginary. But one of the things that because I have this software that kind of puts percentages on what type of words people use to describe what they see, and basically the word that appeared more and more, like it makes like this big, it was war. So it was the word war, because what they saw in this movement of water and how it circulates from one part to another, I think it correlated to what we are experiencing today in regards to, shores and people fighting over water and being like, using water as a resource, as a bargain chip. And it's interesting what it opened up, like in the imaginary of people, opened this potential space in which people can just tune in and build on this initial idea that we started to work on.
Yeah, well, this is really fascinating, because when I saw the piece, my imagination didn't go there. But now that you speak about it, it does relate also how the performers move with each other, also how then the vessels also translates the water from one side to the other. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
It didn't happen for me as well. I mean, also for me, it was almost like going into this feminist imaginary in which our own organs are taken inside out and they become like these worlds that they are exposed, in which water is moving. And like in my imaginary, they could also be seen like making associations with different bodies of water that exist in nature. But then when I looked on certain specific aspects of the piece through the eyes of the audience that, of course, didn't have this context and the research that I was having, and I looked on a moment in which they were like using this instrument, it was making that sound that actually for some people sounded like some type of fussing bomb, like this type of bomb. Then I said, oh yeah, actually Like if you look at it from this perspective, it actually opens that space, and I don't mind, because this is like, I think that's why, for example, it's one of the reasons that I kind of chose dance and choreography over film, because it kind of gives you, this possibility of seeing so many things in an image.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. But also, I mean, through this talk that we're having, I think we can also understand that you have a very research-based process. That you take time to develop the projects, which is really great. Can you share a bit with us more on this ecological, philosophical aspect of the research that you did? And just before you spoke about some papers, maybe it's also interesting for the listeners also to get some reference of what you're reading before or what is relevant for the piece. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think, well, there is Astrida Neimani's book, Bodies of Water, that I think most of the people, especially from creative domains, have read so far. So I have read it 3 times, and I have like a notebook of the book in which I think, because she has also very, I think she has a very performative way of looking at things. Actually, I bought something now from Ecuador, which from a little shop that I think it's really interesting, and it's in Spanish, and I want to read it. Is this book? Yeah, it talks about feminist debates about body, nature, and sciences.
Can you say the name of the book?
It's El discurso no es destino. The discourse is not a destiny. It's interesting. So I'm gonna read this book as well. And yeah, of course, I also read other things, but just to say like two, not to do here like a school a school conversation on this. And other things that I think really helped me is to understand the principle of fluidics and how it works. And it was really interesting to look at them from a choreographic perspective. For example, there is this thing that we say as choreographers and dancers, like how to work with the momentum, or like catch the momentum, or don't lose the momentum, and actually here it was the other way around. For example, we worked on what it means to lose the momentum, or like to stay or to prolong the momentum. So for example, that was one principle that we put in the choreography, and like developing this language that was taken from fluidics. Another things that we took from fluidics is like working with energy, and like how you are storing energy. And for example, like working with pressure, and what is the connection between speed and pressure, and all these kind of things. So also that can be very technical, but for me these are very inspiring, because it kind of encourages you and encourages the dancers to test different hypotheses of movement. And when we started to work on the movement, this is exactly how we thought about it. So we started with the hypothesis. We say, let's experience with the body what it means to lose the momentum. And then we would stay the entire day and read about it, understand what it means, a momentum in fluidics, what it means to lose it. And then at the end of our rehearsal day, we will take notes, and we will understand how we want to use that principle. So, because usually people ask, like, how do you actually work with this type of scientific notions? And for example, this is how I work. Very like experiential, actually, this is the word in English. Like doing like experimentation, like in a lab. We come from a hypothesis. And then we try it with the dancers, and then the dancers might say, no, this was wrong. Like this cannot apply. Let's change it. And then we change it. And another language appears, not only from translating these ideas into the movement, but also from contradictions, from transformations, from things that appear. Maybe we say, oh, today all our hypothesis was like we cannot do anything, but something else appears that starts from that. And from this perspective, it was really amazing, because Ioana had a huge research for us. She basically, for 1 week, she was giving us lectures on fluidics. The girls were working with the materials. We learned the history of it. The first analog computer was a water computer in the Hellenistic period until the Moniac computer in the 1950s. So both me and the dancers and everyone, including the technicians, were there actually learning about this, And that was really I like this type of process because I also think that it fits everyone involved, it fits their curiosity, their mind, their imaginary. It's not only useful for the project in that specific time and space. Yeah, I like to offer the team this type of opportunity to not to do research myself, I go somewhere and I stay there alone and then I come with big revelation. It's more like we do it together and we test some things and then together we find the language and we will call this the language of the show.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. I mean, there's also a very strong parallelism in terms of methodology of what you're describing and also what is happening in science. Because in science also you have to work as a team, you have to work together to achieve something. This idea of the lonely genius is actually not real, and it was never like this. So there's also this collectivity around defining an idea or testing a thesis or testing a proposal. Yeah. But to go back to the piece, so the sensations that we feel during the show, because the show is also very sensorial and very haptic through the movement of the dancers, but also the sounds, also the sound that the water provokes. There's something about this immersion, resistance, and flow that it's present in the sculptures, and also we see it in the show. Did you explore these qualities of sensation with when you were making the piece together with the performers?
Yes. And actually one super simple principle is the squeeze. Because when you stop the systems, it's like a squeeze, also on the tube, you have to stop the water by squeezing it. So we used a lot this idea of squeezing and sliding, and squeeze actually puts resistance, what you said. So, and we worked so much with this idea of resistance and resisting current flows. So basically to stay as much as possible in a certain state and to accumulate a certain type of energy until it is impossible to contain it, just like it happens in a system in which a lot of water is accumulated and then you stop it. And we actually, one of the first principles we experienced is the resistor, what a resistor actually does in a fluidic system, and pressure, and what is the connection between resistance and pressure. So yeah, we worked with all of this, and although at the beginning it was kind of technical, I would say, I think what happened in a very beautiful way with these dancers is that actually they put it in their mind and in their bodies, and they entered certain states that are kind of trance-like or hypnotic, or kind of really going inside while they were doing this, that created something else, this type of, that is a bit more how do you say it? Kinetic, touchy, or something like this. But yes, indeed, I'm glad you noticed. But these are usually things that are so inside the process that you don't even tell afterwards, because they're at the beginning of your process when you start actually shaping everything. And another interesting idea from this perspective is playing with speeds as well, because we have different speeds that we didn't try to sync, so we try to unsync them. One is the speed, and I think the choreography comes from that, from how these speeds interact. So one is the layer of the water that basically moves all the time throughout the show. We have this system in which we regulate the speed of the water using certain sensors that the dancers are placing in the salt water. And then it moves through the stage. And then we thought about what type of speed and how it is regulated throughout the show. And then there are several speeds that in which the dancers are performing as well, which are like trying not to keep like this median speed ever. So going maybe to extremes or like playing so much with speed so that they lose the connection with timing. And then we have the music that has a completely different speed and tempo and uses comes as a different layer. So we have these 3 layers of time that come from these three compositional tools that we have on stage.
No, it's great that you bring the topic of the sound because it does play a central role. And for me, it's not only atmospheric sound, but also it becomes like a structural force that goes through the piece. So how was to work together with the sound artist also for this piece?
Yeah, actually, Simina said that at the beginning, that she said that she feels that her role is to connect to my world and Ioana's world. But I felt that she was doing much more than that. Simina and Ioana, we are very perfectionist. So the 3 of us, we are like super perfectionist and very self-critical of what we do. But I think Simina is like the best in this. And basically how she's very good also at sonification of data. And how she created the music, of course, I don't know exactly.
Okay, let me just interrupt you a bit. Can you explain a bit what is this soundification of data?
Yeah, basically she works with data sets and she creates sounds based on that data sets. It's not
So data like numbers, any type of data.
Any
Yeah,
type
okay.
of data.
Okay.
Yeah. And in this specific case, first of all, she was part of the process training the dancers in this technique of deep listening based on Pauline Oliveros exercises and writings. And also she worked with them vocally, and they had an entire week in which basically she taught us how to listen carefully, also to the sounds that we don't hear, because the piece was a lot about what we can't hear, what happens inside our bodies. And then for the creation, she used sounds, for example, sounds that are from our lungs, but that sounds that are normally recorded, like with medical instruments. Like internal sounds from our own body, but also like deep sea sounds and the sounds of the objects and the water moving on stage. We had a very interesting and fun recording session with the objects and the entire installation. And then she basically collected all these sounds and she created the soundtrack that we are now using on stage. And also integrating what already you can hear on stage by amplifying the sounds of the objects themselves. So yeah, this is what she did. But for me, it was amazing also to see her work with the dancers as well. I think might have a gift for that.
Maybe someone also that will start work more in choreography. But I mean, in the last half an hour that we're talking, I also wanted to ask about like the structure of the piece, if it has a fixed structure or if it's possible that the dancers are also improvising a lot. Because when I'm hearing, I'm also thinking there must be like a lot of unexpected moments through the piece because of the movement of the water, because of the movement or also the sound that happens. I think it could be interesting also that you could share with us a bit more about that.
I mean, usually my pieces are kind of scored, but like on a very detailed level. So yeah, I must say that the structure is very clear, so they know what they are doing at all moments in the piece, but what exactly they are doing with that principles and how they time it, it's differently. So I think because this is also part of my practice as well, that you need to allow the dancers like to feel new energies and like to really create a real time feeling on the stage. But it's really hard for me when people ask me if it's like completely choreographed or if it's scored, because I say it's scored, is not choreographed. But if you look at it 3 times in a row, it seems pretty choreographed. So I don't really know how to reply this. It is scored, so it's not like steps that they are learning, and that they, for example, if a new dancer comes in, it's pretty hard to learn the steps. But it's more like you need to understand the principles and how they are timed and like what are the rules of interaction, and then you can perform it. And actually for this autumn in October, we are creating a new version for museum in which we are going to work with 8 dancers, and we're going to do this durational for 6 hours, and like translating this into a durational pace that is going to be very score based, and it's going to work like mainly on principles. And we also have this 10 days implementation time that will, I think, kind of force us, but in a good way, I say, to go only to the essential principles of what this means. So yeah, and this was a frame that I created for myself, in the sense that I put these limitations. I was not obliged to, but I thought about the frame of working in which would enable the dancers to work with these principles, understand them, but not end up choreographing them. I don't know if it's
No,
really.
no, that makes sense. And also, I found super interesting that it's also a project that, as you said, started a couple of years ago, and now also you stretch it and you give it new forms and new shapes. So I also am curious to hear from you, what are you working on in next? So you spoke about this project. Maybe I think it's also interesting for the listeners to know what comes next for you, if you want to share a bit with us.
Yeah, basically now what I'm most focused on in terms of creating or like creation of new work, because I'm also touring like past works that I have, and I'm also started to tour this piece. We're gonna have our international premiere in Tanz in August, but then we are going to present it in Italy as well. So yeah, I'm also touring, but I also have like this new creation that I talked a bit before that involves, it's called Women at Work. And I created with Flor Firvida Martin. She's an artist living in Mexico City, but she's Argentinian, in which we document the gestures of work. We call it the choreography of labor of different different women from Bucharest, from Mexico City, from the Republic of Moldova, and also from Ecuador, from an indigenous community. I just returned from Ecuador that is called Sachawasi. So we work with in macro settings like Mexico City, which is like a city like a country, but also like in super micro, let's say environments, like for example in Sachawasi, where we worked only with a family, like an extended family. So yeah, basically this is a video installation in which we tell the story of 5 women from each of these communities in synchronized screens, basically telling these stories, in which we do a performative interview with them and we film their movements in a film technique called camera lenta. So yeah, we're going to present this actually in the Museum of Contemporary Art of Romania at the beginning of November. So yeah, this kind of takes a lot of resources, I must say. Like in the years in which I'm actually working on this project, I have to save like half of the year for this, because it's a lot of research, it's a lot of filming, it's a lot of post-production, and then implementing it in museums also takes a lot of time. And also we are presenting in Spain in 3 different locations, lecture performance that we have started to create based on this project. So yeah. So this is going to be my year, like I'm working on this project, but also like I'm expanding this notion of the choreography of water, and I started to tour it as like its stage version. So yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, amazing. I always find it important also to ask the artist what they are doing next, because most of the times also reveals other facets of their work. And I think this is your case. Even if it looks something very different from the choreography of water, there's a lot of connections there, and that I think is also super interesting to think, and that come also from you as a total artist and as a person. Yeah. Maybe as a final words, what do you hope that people carry with them after seeing the choreography of water? Something more sensorial, more reflective, more political?
I'm more on the reflective side because I'm also like like when I see performances, usually I enter in this reflexive state, and I would like if people could, yeah, when they see our work, can open themselves and be in this reflective state, because usually being in this state opens also other states and other questions. And also, like, I'm not an artist that tries to answer things, like, I don't think I have the answer for many things. So I like questions. And if the audience goes home with a lot of questions, that's also very good for me, because I also take a lot of questions. So I have a lot of questions from the work that I'm doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I like that a lot. That we carry questions with us. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you again for this wonderful talk, and we are really looking forward to see you here live in Berlin in August. Yeah, thank you, Simona.
Can't wait.